The phone buzzed against my kitchen counter, an innocuous vibration that sent an icy chill straight to my core. I had just gotten home after a long day at work, a tedious day filled with endless meetings, phone calls, and that gnawing feeling of exhaustion that seemed to follow me everywhere. I dropped my bag on the kitchen chair, already thinking of the evening I had ahead. Reheating leftovers, some time on the couch with my favorite book, a glass of wine, maybe an episode or two of a show. The mundane comforts of life after years of marriage, when you think you know the person you're married to, when you believe you're safe. The screen flashed, and my husband's name appeared. "I'm leaving you for someone younger." I stood, frozen, the words burning into my mind, each one heavier than the last. My heart pounded in my chest, the pulse echoing in my ears. I read it again. "I'm leaving you for someone younger." The words, simple, cold, cruel, they had the weight of a sledgehammer, cracking my world apart. It was like a moment frozen in time, where every sound, every feeling, every emotion was stifled in a vacuum, and the only thing that mattered was that sentence. How could he do this to me? How could he leave me for someone younger? Tears didn't come immediately. I didn't even know how to feel. Shock, betrayal, anger. Oh, so much anger, though I wasn't sure where to direct it. Was it at him for being so careless, or was it at myself for not seeing the signs, for trusting him for years, for believing that we were something more than just another statistic in a broken marriage? I can't believe this is happening, I thought. My mind raced, running over the last few months, trying to find an answer, a reason, something, anything that would explain this. But all I came up with was an overwhelming sense of betrayal. And then, as if the universe had conspired to add salt to the wound, a picture popped up on the screen of his phone, followed by another text. A woman's smiling face, younger than me, more carefree. Her lips painted a shade of red that mocked me. His new beginning. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was only a few seconds. I turned away, fighting the rising tears, not wanting to appear weak. There would be no crying. Not for him. I was done being the victim. I had spent years of my life with him. Years of love, devotion, building a life together. And now, just like that, he was walking away. But as the shock began to fade, a cold clarity settled in. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I wasn't going to stand by while he tore everything we'd built apart and walked into a new life as if nothing mattered. This was my time to take control, my time to rewrite the story. He would regret this. I would make sure of it. The weight of the text message still sat heavily on my chest. Every time I looked at my phone, it was there, mocking me. "I'm leaving you for someone younger." His words weren't just a dagger through the heart. They were a declaration of war. The very life I thought I knew was suddenly crumbling around me, and I had no idea how deep the betrayal ran. I forced myself to breathe. I couldn't crumble, not now. Not when I had to figure out what was really going on. I had always thought of us as a team. Sure, marriage wasn't perfect. We had our issues like any couple. But we had worked through them, or so I thought. In the last few months, there had been little things that felt off. His distance, the late nights at work, the subtle shifts in his behavior. I didn't want to admit it. But now, looking back, it was all so clear. He had been pulling away long, before he ever sent that message. The house felt like a stranger's home as I moved through it. The silence was suffocating, the air thick with a tension I couldn't shake. I opened the kitchen drawer, pulling out the envelope that had been sitting there for days. Unopened, ignored. It was from a credit card company, and though it was addressed to both of us, I hadn't gotten around to opening it. Now, something gnawed at me. I ripped it open, the paper crackling in my hand. A balance transfer. I stared at the document. A large sum, too large. I wasn't sure what it was for, but I knew it didn't make sense. Our finances had always been tight, but this was different. Way different. Then I remembered. He had been talking about investments, about opportunities. I hadn't paid much attention. He had always been the one to handle our finances, managing our savings and debts. I thought I could trust him. I pulled my phone back out, my fingers trembling as I searched through his recent bank statements, emails, anything. There was a sinking feeling in my stomach as I began to piece together the truth. He had been funneling money into a secret account, one that I hadn't known about. I clicked open a folder titled Retirement Fund. But this wasn't a retirement fund. This was money set aside for something else, something hidden. It hit me like a truck. The truth wasn't just that he was leaving me for someone younger. He was setting himself up for a fresh start, financially and emotionally. He had been planning this escape for months, maybe longer. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I would just keep being the dutiful wife, the one who trusted him with everything. But I wasn't stupid. I scrolled through his phone, opening apps I had never seen before. A few clicks here, a few glances there, and I found something that made my stomach twist, a private chat with her, the woman he was leaving me for. They had been talking about me, about us, and in a way that made my skin crawl. They had been planning this, orchestrating it from the very beginning, as though my life meant nothing to either of them. There it was, the ultimate betrayal. He wasn't just taking a younger woman into his life. He was taking my future too, my stability, my security. And it wasn't just about him and her. It was about everything he had done in secret, everything he had stolen from me, my trust, my comfort, my peace. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was furious. But more than that, I was determined. He had thought he could walk away, that he could take the pieces of my life and build something new without a second thought. But I wasn't going to let him. I took a long, shuddering breath and set my phone down. I had to think. I had to plan. He had played me, yes, but I was about to turn the tables. It wasn't just about the money, the house, or the fact that he had betrayed me emotionally. It wasn't even just the lies he'd told about his late nights, his work trips, or the subtle hints he'd dropped about feeling unfulfilled. What really cut deep was that he had shattered the one thing that should have been the cornerstone of any relationship: trust. Our daughter, Lily, was only 12. She had no idea what was happening, but she would soon feel the effects. This wasn't just about me anymore. He had involved her in this mess, whether he realized it or not. She was going to ask questions, and I had no idea how I was going to explain it. How would I tell her that her father, the man she adored, had abandoned her for another woman? How would I shield her from the truth when I, too, was drowning in it? I had always prided myself on providing her with a stable, loving home. She deserved that. She didn't deserve to grow up in a fractured world, wondering what went wrong, wondering why her father didn't care enough to stay. I looked at the photos on the wall, pictures from happier times. There we were, at family gatherings, birthdays, vacations. The three of us smiling, pretending like everything was perfect. And now it felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. The future I had planned, the dream of raising our daughter in a united home, was now shattered. The betrayal wasn't just an attack on me. It was an attack on our family. I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let him take my peace, my dignity, and my daughter's future. He had thought he could simply walk away and start over with someone, younger, leaving the wreckage of our lives behind. But I wasn't going to stand by and watch him destroy everything we'd worked so hard for. This was no longer just about my heart being broken. It was about protecting what was mine. It was about making sure Lily didn't feel the sting of abandonment. And it was about making him pay, not just emotionally, but in every way that mattered. He had built his little empire of lies, wrapped in a shiny new life. But I was going to make sure the truth came out. I was going to make sure that every lie he had told, every act of deceit, was exposed for what it really was. He could leave me, but he wouldn't leave unscathed. He had already made the first move, but now it was my turn to make mine. And it wasn't going to be pretty. The thought of him and her together, living their carefree lives while I picked up the pieces of mine, fueled a fire inside me. I had been the devoted wife, the one who stood by his side, supported him, made his life easier. And now, he thought he could waltz away without consequences. But he was wrong. I was about to show him just how wrong he was. This wasn't just about getting back at him. It was about reclaiming my life. It was about making sure that the pieces of me he had torn apart would be rebuilt stronger, more resilient than before. I would rebuild my world, with or without him. And when it was all said and done, he would regret ever leaving me. But it would take more than just anger. I needed strategy. I needed patience. And most of all, I needed to be smarter than him. He thought he could outsmart me. Well, I would show him that he had underestimated me. This was my turning point, and I would make sure that the scales of justice tipped back in my favor. The stakes had never been higher. This was my moment, and I would take it. The rawness of the betrayal had begun to settle into something darker, a resolve, a plan. I couldn't let him walk away without facing the consequences. I knew I had to be smart. Emotional reactions wouldn't help. I had to take a step back, gather my thoughts, and come up with a strategy that would not only expose him for the deceitful man he had become, but also ensure that he lost everything he thought he could take with him. I wasn't going to beg for reconciliation. I wasn't going to cry and plead. I was going to fight for what was mine, the life we built, our daughter's future, my dignity. And when I was finished, I would walk away with my head held high, knowing that he had paid for every lie, every hurtful word, every decision he made behind my back. I sat down at my kitchen table that night, surrounded by the remnants of a life I wasn't sure I could hold on to anymore. The silence felt oppressive, but it was also a catalyst. I needed to organize my thoughts, and I needed to figure out what my next move would be. This wasn't going to be a rash, emotional outburst. This was going to be methodical, calculated. Every step had to count. The first thing I did was set a plan for information gathering. If he thought he could get away with the secret accounts, the lies, and the financial shadiness, then I needed to know exactly what I was up against. I started by going through his phone, emails, and the bills I had never questioned before. His bank statements, credit cards, the investments, everything was fair game now. But I needed more than just financial records to expose him. I needed to get inside his head. I needed to understand how far he had gone, and what weaknesses he had left exposed. That meant finding his connections, his alliances. His younger woman was part of the equation, but there were other players, too. And I wasn't going to let them escape the fallout. If he thought I was naive, thought I was too heartbroken to see what he was doing, he was wrong. He had underestimated me. I went through the friends he'd had over the years. Anyone he had trusted with personal information. There were old emails from his colleagues, one in particular, a name I hadn't seen in ages, Mark. He had been a close friend of my husband's back when we first met. I had never thought much of him. He was always friendly enough, but distant, never quite fitting in with our family. Still, I remembered something about their old conversations. There had always been an undertone with Mark, a little too much praise for my husband's charisma and success, as if he were grooming him for something bigger. What if Mark had been in on it all along? What if he had known about my husband's plans and had helped him orchestrate this mess? If I could get to Mark, I could get answers, and those answers would be vital to my next move. But gathering intel on my husband and his associates was only part of the plan. The other part was about protecting myself and my daughter. I wasn't going to let him take everything. Our house, our savings, and especially the custody of Lily. It was clear he thought that walking away meant he could leave it all behind without any consequences. The first legal step was obvious. I needed a lawyer. A divorce attorney who could help me navigate the financial mess he had left behind and ensure that he couldn't simply disappear with everything. I started researching. I made calls, I read reviews, and by the end of the week, I had set up an appointment with a highly recommended lawyer who specialized in high-stakes divorces. I knew the stakes were high, but I also knew that the truth would come to light eventually. My husband might have thought he could escape with everything, but I was going to make sure that didn't happen. The more I thought about it, the more confident I became in my plan. I wasn't going to play the victim. I was going to expose the truth, gather every shred of evidence I needed, and walk away with my power restored. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't sad or broken. I was focused. I had a plan, and I was going to execute it perfectly. As the days passed, I watched my husband more closely. I paid attention to his every move, his words, his actions. He had no idea what was coming, but I was already one step ahead. It was time for me to reclaim control. I had to be patient, meticulous. I would wait for the right moment to strike. And, when that moment came, he would see exactly how badly he had underestimated me. The days that followed felt like a slow burn. I didn't make any rash moves, didn't let my emotions dictate my actions. I had learned long ago that revenge, when done impulsively, never brought satisfaction. It only left you empty and vulnerable. But this was different. This wasn't just about making him regret what he'd done. This was about ensuring that I had control over the situation, about turning the tables so thoroughly that he would never see it coming. First, I focused on building my case. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof that would shake him to his core. It wasn't enough that I knew about his secret accounts or his late-night meetings. I needed to gather the evidence that would make him realize he couldn't lie his way out of this one. I had already started going through his financial records, but now I took a more systematic approach. I requested copies of everything from the bank, starting with the joint account. The things I found there were staggering. Unexplained transfers, mysterious withdrawals. He had been siphoning off money without a second thought, probably thinking I would never notice. There were even large sums that had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize, one that I now knew wasn't for investments like he had told me. I had my lawyer on standby, waiting for me to provide the paperwork to start the formal proceedings. But it wasn't just the finances. I knew that the emotional and personal side of this betrayal needed to be exposed too. I had found the conversations with her, the woman he was leaving me for, and I knew they would be crucial. I didn't just need to show that he was unfaithful. I needed to prove that he had been planning this for months, grooming her while pretending that everything was fine at home. I couldn't just send him the evidence and wait for him to respond. I needed to create a scenario that would force his hand, something that would drive the message home loud and clear. One afternoon while he was at work, I made the call. I reached out to his assistant at the office, under the pretense of needing to get some documents signed for an old project we had worked on together. She had always been friendly, but I had never given her much thought. She seemed nice, but people have their secrets. I knew it wasn't impossible that she knew something, anything that could help me. She didn't disappoint. Through casual conversation, I learned more about his behavior in the office, his long lunches with friends, his disappearing acts in the middle of the day. She didn't have concrete evidence, but she confirmed what I already suspected. There had been a shift in his demeanor months ago, like he was preparing for something big. I thanked her, but I knew that this was just the beginning. If he thought he could manipulate those around him, keep secrets from me, he was about to find out that his web of lies was not as secure as he thought. The next step involved the woman he was seeing, the one he'd chosen over me. I didn't want to deal with her directly, but I had an idea. I didn't need to be friends with her or even confront her. What I needed was her social media, the details she had left behind, the photos, the posts. It wasn't hard to dig into her background, everything from her professional life to personal choices. She was the missing puzzle piece that would help solidify my plan. I spent hours combing through her social media profiles, pulling out pictures, locations, and even the little interactions she had with my husband. It wasn't hard to see the pattern emerging. She was in on it from the start. And while I wasn't going to expose her right away, I needed her to understand that I knew everything. She had no idea what was coming. But it wasn't all about gathering evidence for some grand expose. It was about preparation, about building the foundation for what was to come. I had scheduled a meeting with the lawyer to go over my case, and I was ready. All my evidence, his financial malfeasance, the emails, the chats, even the statements from his assistant, would be compiled into a document that would hit him hard. The moment he realized I had all of this on paper, it would be too late for him to backpedal. I had to make sure I had every angle covered before I confronted him. I started making copies of everything: records, pictures, screenshots, and statements. I wasn't going to give him an easy out. He thought he could take everything and leave me with nothing. But I was going to turn the tables, expose him in ways he hadn't imagined, and make him regret ever thinking he could walk away without facing the consequences. The next few days passed slowly. Each time he came home, I felt a bit more disconnected from him, as though I were watching a stranger move through the motions of a life I thought I knew. The more I planned, the more I realized how far he had gone to make sure I didn't catch on. But I was prepared. I had everything in place, every piece of the puzzle fitting together in a way that would be undeniable. He had thought he could escape the consequences of his actions, that he could slip away into the arms of a younger woman without anything coming back to haunt him. But he hadn't counted on me, on the woman he thought he had controlled for all these years. I wasn't the same person anymore. It was time to make my move. The moment of reckoning had arrived. I had done everything I could to prepare. The evidence was gathered, the plan was set, and now it was time to confront him. I was calm, cool even. There was no room for fear anymore. This was my moment to take back control, to expose the truth and make sure that he couldn't just walk away unscathed. The house felt unusually quiet when he walked in that evening, as though the air itself was holding its breath. He smiled, at me, a smile that once would have reassured me, but now only felt like an insult. He thought I was still the same woman who would just accept his abandonment, his lies. But I wasn't. I had waited for this moment, and when he asked if we could talk, I agreed, even though I knew exactly what was coming. We sat across from each other in the living room, and for a brief moment, there was a sense of awkwardness between us. The tension was thick, and I could see the nervousness in his eyes. He knew something was off, though he likely didn't realize the depth of what I had uncovered. But tonight, he would find out. "Look, I'm sorry you had to hear about it like this," he began, trying to soften the conversation, his voice more tentative than usual. I wasn't happy, and I didn't know how to fix it. She makes me feel alive again." I didn't interrupt him. I let him speak, knowing he was trying to justify his actions. But in the back of my mind, I was already several steps ahead. I had already read the emails, the texts, the documents. I had seen it all. He thought he could control the narrative, but now it was my turn to tell the story. "I understand," I said, my voice calm. "I understand that you weren't happy. What I don't understand is how you thought you could destroy everything we had without any consequences." He blinked, a brief flicker of confusion crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice shifting to defensiveness. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for the stack of papers I had neatly arranged on the coffee table between us. I slid them toward him. "Here's what I'm talking about," I said quietly, my voice steady. "These are the bank records from our joint account, the ones you thought I'd never look at. These transfers, the ones to your secret account, I know about them. I know about the money you've been siphoning off for months, and I know you've been using it to fund your escape, your new life." His eyes widened in disbelief as he glanced down at the papers. His hands shook ever so slightly, but he quickly covered it up. "What are you trying to do? Make me feel guilty? We're done. There's nothing left here for me," he said, his words lacking the conviction they once had. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I leaned in, my gaze unwavering. "You thought you could just leave me and our daughter behind, didn't you? You thought you could take everything, my trust, my security, and walk away with no consequences. Well, that's where you're wrong." I grabbed my phone from the table, opening it to show him the screenshots of the texts between him and her. His face blanched as he read the words, the casual tone, the way they had talked about me behind my back. How he had made me seem like a fool. "This isn't just about you and her," I continued, my voice growing more powerful. "It's about the lies you've told, the manipulation, the way you've betrayed not just me, but our daughter. Did you think she wouldn't notice? Did you think you could just walk away from her without leaving a scar?" His expression flickered. The bravado was gone now, replaced by an uncomfortable shift in his posture. He had thought he was in control, but the truth was spilling out in front of him, unraveling the careful facade he had built. He couldn't hide from it anymore. "You don't get to just walk away and pretend everything is fine," I said, holding his gaze. "You don't get to destroy our family and leave without facing the consequences." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw him at a loss for words, his confidence shattered by the evidence I had laid out before him. "You can't take everything," I added. "I'm going to make sure Lily has everything she deserves. I'm going to make sure you can't get away with abandoning her, with taking money that wasn't yours to begin with. I'm done being the victim in your story." I stood up and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," I said, my voice firm. "I'll make sure the divorce is as painful for you as it has been for me. And when it's all said and done, I'll make sure you regret ever thinking you could walk away from this family." As I turned to leave, I heard him call my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to hear his apologies or his explanations anymore. They meant nothing. I had won. I had taken back control of my life, my future, and my daughter's future. The power was mine now. The next few months were a blur, filled with legal battles, paperwork, and finalizing our divorce. But through it all, I stood tall. Every day, I grew stronger. Every day, I felt more at peace. I had taken what had been stolen from me and reclaimed it. My ex-husband thought he could walk away with everything, his younger woman, his secrets, his lies. But in the end, it was him who was left with nothing. He had underestimated me, thought he could manipulate me. But I had played the long game, and I had won. In the end, karma had done its job, and so had I. I had exposed the truth, reclaimed my peace, and ensured that justice was served. Now, it was time to start anew, to rebuild, to live my life on my terms, with my daughter by my side. And this time, no one would take that away from me.